This week, Paul and I interview Garrett Gross, Senior Solutions Engineer at Rapid7. Git patches a remote code execution vulnerability in the news, as well as Google finally shuts down Google Plus after 500,000 accounts are potentially affected by a data breach. And Facebook wants you to put a camera in your house. Stay tuned for all that and more on this episode of Application Security Weekly.
This is a Security Weekly production. Layered Insight is the industry's first embedded security approach for containers. Trusted by Global 1000 enterprises to secure their containerized applications, it's the only solution that requires no root privileges, has zero dependency on the underlying infrastructure, and is fully portable across any container environment. Unified DevOps and SecOps, enabling the rapid development of containerized applications without worrying about security. To learn more, please visit layeredinsight.com/ASW. Rapid7 powers the practice of SecOps. Using shared data, analytics, and automated workflows, SecOps unites IT, DevOps, and security teams to make security an outcome of innovation. Rapid7 combines technology, expertise, and advocacy to drive vulnerability management, application security, incident detection, and log management for more than 7,000 organizations worldwide. Power up your SecOps practice with a free trial at rapid7.com/securityweekly.
Welcome, everyone, to episode 35, our 36th episode of Application Security Weekly. I am, of course, your host, Keith Hoodlet, and I'm excited to be joined once again by my co-host, Paul Asadorian. Paul, welcome to the show.
I'm Pickle Rick! Hey! Pickle Rick! Pickle Rick!
I had no idea Pickle Rick was going to make an appearance on the show today, but this is very exciting. I did not anticipate this whatsoever.
Hold on.
Happy Halloween, everyone.
I'll be right back.
There it is. Oh, God. Hold on, I wish I had a Pickle Rick outfit now at this point.
If I need to defend myself, too.
So for those listeners of the podcast, if you get an opportunity to go jump on and actually watch the video of this episode, you're going to want to do that. I guarantee it. It's funny because I do have a couple of quick announcements before we jump in, which, I've been totally sidetracked at this point. So first and foremost, be sure to check out our on-demand material. Some of our previously recorded webcasts, including one that we recently did with Domain Tools, is now available on demand at securityweekly.com/on-demand. Of course, join us for our next webcast with Signal Sciences about which way you should shift testing in the SDLC. That's going to be on November 8th from 3 to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Go to securityweekly.com/Signal Sciences to register now. With that, I'm actually very excited to be joined by our special guest on today's show, Garrett Gross,
who received his first modem. Pickle Rick! Sorry.
And Pickle Rick. Sorry, we got two guests today. And so Garrett, not Pickle Rick, received his first modem at age 6, which he plugged in, and he has been plugged into ever since. I feel bad because it was probably 28.8 dial-up back in the day, if I'm not mistaken, Garrett. So,
yeah.
But today, Garrett is a senior solutions engineer with a specialization in application security at Rapid7. He serves as an escalation layer to the applied engineering department, provides technical enablement, and facilitates cross-departmental functionality. So Garrett, welcome to the show.
No, I like that. I'm going to change my intro to facilitate gross departmental between the departments. I like that. Hey, thanks so much for having me, guys. I'm stoked to be on the show.
Yeah, Pickle
Awesome.
Rick had to leave. He had an appointment with his therapist.
It makes perfect sense. Psychotherapy sounds about right for Pickle Rick at this point in time. But
for those of you that have watched Rick and Morty before, it was a special
can we just
treat.
talk about Rick and Morty for the entire time instead of applications?
we totally could.
You could probably use it as all the ways in which development goes badly with all the experiments that they do. There's something there. I've never actually watched the show, believe it or not.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So
you got to do that.
I don't know how I missed the bandwagon on that.
That is actually my Halloween costume. Everyone's like, what is that for? It's my Halloween costume. And they're like, what do you? I'm like, I got to take my kids trick-or-treating. So that's my opportunity to get dressed up.
That's
so we'll
perfect.
see how many of my neighbors recognize the outfit.
You'll be able to subtly, like, you'll know exactly what kind of things they're into when
Yes.
they're like, "Hi, nice outfit." And you're like, "Yeah."
And pretty much by the 20th time I say I'm Pickle Rick, my wife might murder me. So here's the making sure I make it through Halloween.
He'll be
You're
dead,
ruining
Pickle
this
Rick.
for the
There'll be like
kids.
shanking marks in the outfit.
Yeah, it's all good.
So, Garrett, I know that you guys recently did a bunch of stuff at AppSec USA regarding product security by design. There was a really nice, basically, I don't know, it's like a one-pager, but it's a PDF that I've included in the show notes for this week's listeners that talks a little bit about product security and 4 steps that you can go ahead and take, in terms of building AppSec earlier into the SDLC, or GASP, maybe doing DevSecOps. So one of the things I really liked about this, Garrett, was right in the front, you actually have, the software development lifecycle of design, development, maintain, and support. And of course, the cost of fixing an issue. So I don't know if you wanted to maybe start there, because I used to work at Rapid7 as well. I know that you guys have some really great products, including, of course, all the stuff that you do with now Insight AppSec.
And Keith, speaking of those great products, you can go to rapid7.com/security weekly to find out more and get exclusive content and stuff. Rapid7.com/security weekly.
There you go. There you go. So definitely hit that up, because, they track it and they see, if our listeners are going to Rapid7 stuff through that, they know that we're actually doing our job, which is good. And so one of the things that I liked about this, though, is the inflection point that you have on cost of fixing an issue in the case of a breach. So maybe you want to start there, Garrett.
Sure. Yeah. So, for you, those of you who are not watching this on the screen, Hoodie's talking about a graph basically taking us through the development life cycle and how the cost, exponentially increases over that time. And we see a lot of folks, and we saw this in, network security, maybe in the last 10 years or so, to where you don't really measure the cost of application security until something happens. So in the case of a breach, it's exponentially more expensive to fix than if we're to inject ourselves earlier on the development life cycle. So, like everything else, we're just learning the same lessons over and over again, just this time under the auspices of AppSec.
So what are some of the ways that you would recommend teams start to catch bugs earlier in the process of development? I know that a lot of people talk about DevSecOps as being the answer. And I think in a lot of ways it is, if you understand exactly what DevSecOps entails. So the first step on here actually talks about building cross-functional partnerships. And I don't know if you have any more to say about that, Garrett. Of course, you speak with a lot of customers, I imagine, on a pretty regular basis. So you get to see both the wins and the losses in that front.
Yeah. And those of us who've been in the seat, that's just a really nice way of saying, learn how to work with a team who does things differently than you do. Historically, application security has been, or can be, a contentious relationship between the InfoSec teams and the development teams, because, you think about it, you're calling someone's baby ugly over and over again, and you're adding, hours and hours of work to their day. So, if you're not doing this from a standpoint of how can I help you do your job while improving the overall security of this application that pays the light bill, how can I improve your job, help you do your job easier at the same time doing our job as security professionals? So it's very important to have a relationship with these people. It's not just some remote team that you're working with. These are other people that have tasks and hours in their day to get stuff done too. So building common ground. It sounds silly, but take these folks out for lunch or something, and try to understand what issues they face in their day as it relates to secure coding, and how you can help augment that. It's really pretty simple.
And Paul, I imagine that you probably experienced, similar things in the network space, especially given your experience at university. And then, of course, I imagine working with like sysadmins when you were doing this stuff at Tenable as well. I imagine there are probably, like, to your point earlier, Garrett, that there are a lot of parallels in what is happening in AppSec today to what has happened traditionally. So, Paul, I don't know if maybe there's anything that you can draw from that, as well as what's coming next after we start to get this stuff adopted.
I like to say I did a lot of things on purpose, but certainly knowing what I know now, I was like, wow, that's why that worked and that didn't when I was at the university in from 2001 to 2007. And the things that did work are having like lunch meetings. So I used to do like a regular presentation to the sysadmins and just tell them about security, like no strings attached. I'm just going to, disseminate information for free. We'll have lunch. It'll be a great time. Some of the other things are having the meeting before the meeting happens, rather than letting everyone get to the meeting and spend time explaining what you want to do, why you want to do it, and trying to get everyone on board before the meeting. I would go to them and say, I'm thinking of proposing this. Like, what do you think of that? And what challenges do you have in understanding their perspective before we got to the meeting with everyone? Were two things that I think are very still applicable today that I did kind of like by accident back in the day, now recognizing that, there's some logic behind it and theory behind it.
And it's funny that in this case, it goes back to the DevSecOps manifesto that Shannon Leitz put together on devsecops.org, which is the very first thing in that manifesto is leaning in over saying no, which, to both your point, Garrett, as well as to your point, Paul, building those cross-functional relationships is key to winning, right? Like you can't convince somebody to adopt your process unless, of course, you first talk to them about what it is that you're thinking of doing and why not that will work. So of course, from there, though, you've then got to make decisions about embedding tools into that process. So Garrett, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about what that actually looks like, especially now with Inside AppSec, as well as, of course, AppSpider as well to some degree, and how that's evolving as you see it today.
Yeah. So, again, you want to improve someone's life. You want to help them do their job better. So when we talk about augmenting the development process, it's not, hey, why don't you pause your job so that I can come in here and do a quick scan? You need, and we're talking specifically about application security within the, software development lifecycle, the whole CI/CD aspiration, and that is integrating with tools that we're already using within the development lifecycle, like Jenkins, like TeamCity, or if you're a Microsoft shop, TFS. Integrating with those tools seamlessly to where you're able to, in the case of a DAST, perform a DAST scan as this code's being checked in, and performing or delivering iterative, more digestible results that a dev can use to improve the that piece in regards to security, rather than saying, well, let me scan your application. It's going to take you offline for 6 hours, and then I'm going to have a 70-page report for you to work on afterwards.
And the biggest thing that I've seen successful in that front as well, Garrett, is when you actually go ahead and do kind of like the collaborative scanning process, right? So I've seen a lot of people, it's like if you build partnerships, if you actually have those kind of relationships with folks who you say, hey, I've got a new tool that I want to try, or a new type of thing that I want to try with this. Can maybe we do like just one scan, do it as a small batch, maybe just one application instead if it's multiple scans, and say, yep, can we actually get this to the point that it works regularly without any sort of maintenance, right? And once we can, I imagine there's a whole lot you can do with it from there, right? So it's, you now have an opportunity to really grow the program, to grow the footprint that you have in that team. It's just a matter of first getting started with one application, right?
Yep. And one thing to remember, it's an iterative process. Or it's an accretive process. You're establishing this relationship, and then based on that established relationship, you have this trust of this other team to say, hey, why don't we try this? We've already established that we have the same common goal that we're working towards. I have an idea of how to get there. And it just kind of like what you said, it's building on that, and let's start out with one and give this a shot. It's all about building that trust.
Well, and I think it speaks to the sales process too, right? And one part of the sales process, like if you read the book The Brain Audit, and you may think, what does sales have to do with application security? It very much applies, as particularly in this case, as a testimonial is very powerful when you read about other people that have done it and had a great experience. Think about products that you've bought that you're kind of like on the fence about. I don't know if I need that, but hey, my friend got one. I think we can give an example. Keith, the Remarkable tablet, right? I would have been like, yeah, no, I don't need that. Keith was like, I got one and it's really awesome, right? And so I'm like, okay, I'll get one too. Turns out in that particular case, it is really awesome, and we're not endorsed by Remarkable in any way, shape, form, or fashion, but cool product, right? You can do the same thing internally with your teams. And what I tell people that manage, some people are managing 25, 50, or 100 different software development projects, maybe 50 different teams, is pick the team that's most receptive to change, most receptive to adopting new technology, and execute the project with them. Then have them present, not you, have them present in front of all the other development teams and go, hey guys, this was pretty easy. We're better off for it. Here's the value. And that's how you start to gain adoption in your enterprise.
You've demonstrated that you're able to solve a problem more effectively. Absolutely.
Yeah. It's one of those things where it's almost like once you've streamlined that process and you've actually automated some of it, and then if someone even documented like how that's being done, whether that's you as the security team or the team that actually has adopted that process, to your point, Paul, if they actually are the ones that talk about it with the rest of the organization and say, hey, look, we're doing this stuff automatically. We don't have any ticket requests anymore. We just automate all these things. It's like, yeah, that's pretty awesome. And then suddenly everybody's like, what do you mean? You don't have to wait for your scan results?
Yeah. It's the power of the testimonial, right? Yeah.
So that is definitely an important piece, and actually it gets to the fourth point on this item as well for you, Garrett, which is getting feedback in real time, right? Like, how often is it that that we end up seeing teams say, yeah, I'm done working on this feature now, I need to scan it once and then push it into production, instead of maybe scanning it throughout the entire 2 or 4 week sprint that they've been working on this thing. So how often is that still a problem in your experience?
Well, and wow, that's a great question. I think that's really kind of what we're all trying to solve. And it really depends on where you're at as an organization in your maturity timeline in regards to security, in regards to application security, in regards to DevOps. If you're really, if you're what I consider, if you really got it going and you have Sec DevOps, as much as I don't like the full blown term Sec DevOps, if you have that really going, you're not even going to notice that these scans are happening. You're going to, like I said, your development team will expect this telemetry to come back to them and expect to use that to, bake that into their code review or whatever process they have, to where it no longer becomes a hindrance. It becomes something that accelerates their ability to push out secure code, because they're not having to go back to the well 3 or 4 times when we find issues. You push it out once, maybe twice, and then it's good to go.
So Paul, I don't know if you had anything to add to that. I had actually a couple more questions, but
no, go for it, Keith.
So in your experience then, Garrett, as you talk to a lot of different companies, what are maybe some of the real pain points that they encounter in adopting this changing model? Is it the security team, is still kind of getting their legs under them in terms of building APIs or inputting these tools into the process? Is it the communication side where they're having a hard time, finding the right stakeholders and actually bringing them to the table? In your experience, kind of in a day-to-day, what seems to be the biggest hang up? Because I imagine our listeners are probably thinking, I'd love to adopt this in my organization, I just don't know how.
Yeah, and I think it's a mishmash of everything that you mentioned. It's the teams have not communicated to establish a common goal. I mean, everyone wants to have a secure web app, but what steps are you going to take to achieve that goal? Are you going to re-architect your development process? Are you going to reset your expectations as a security team? So having a common goal is especially important, and I kind of see that as maybe a one of the more common pitfalls is there's no communication. And kind of related to that, a lot of times the decision to deploy this type of technology is often one-sided. Either it's the security team came up with this and they did not involve the development team, so by the time they get to actually deploy this technology, again, it's going to be a burden to the development process, not an accelerator. And then, another common problem is maybe some unrealistic aspirations of what your team is able to handle. Because I think we would all like to have a fully baked DevOps program where we're running DAS scans every time we check in code, but that requires a very mature organization and an organization that's demonstrated the ability to run DevOps without even considering security. So I think the key here is to know what your capabilities are. Take it, I don't want to say take it slowly because that probably has a negative connotation, but start where you're comfortable, and then build upon that, and realize that it's always a journey. I don't know if that's waxing poetic a little bit too much, but yeah, it's kind of knowing where you are, and being honest with your capabilities, and then just digging in and communicating as effectively as possible with the other stakeholders in your org.
And for you as well, so those are maybe some of the things that that go badly. But when you've seen it gone well, like I imagine it goes really well. But what were some of the things that led to those successes? Again, maybe it's the same things, right? Communicating, getting the right stakeholders to the table, and so on. But is there anything that stands out to you as like, hey, that one team that I was working with, they did this extra step where they POC'd it with either some sort of third party application to then worked with the teams to do some training or some sort of I don't know, collaborative work on things. Like what has been successful or wildly successful as like things that you hadn't thought of that suddenly these teams are starting to do and are getting adoption in their environment?
Okay, yeah, I like that question. I'll answer it more in the behavior that I saw that really seemed to capitalize on that type of investment and really do it correctly. It's when you had folks on all sides very excited about this process, and I don't mean giddy with Rapid7 t-shirts on and stuff, but folks who are actually excited about getting this process going. And what I mean by that verbosely is you have a security professional who is well versed in application security and isn't still kind of learning as they're going. They know exactly what they want out of AppSec, what type of tools, what to look for in their applications. On the development side, you have development managers that are willing to massage their development process to get this to work. Because again, you're going to be trying a lot of things for the first time and probably learning a lot of lessons that may impact your productivity. So understanding that you're going to take that's an acceptable risk. And then finally, just management in general, having the buy-in to have a successful deployment, invest the right people in the problem, and invest the right services to get the deployment actually working. So I mean, again, it does come back to communication. It's everyone on the same page with common goals and with the efforts mapped out that we're actually going to get this DevOps thing going.
It's funny that you say that because I think it's Jez Humble who actually created a plugin for Chrome that places anywhere it says DevOps, like anywhere inside of his Twitter feed, it always replaces it with communication, coordination, and collaboration, which is pretty much everything you just talked about, right? That's the whole journey in and of itself. If you can get those things right, doing the security part of DevSecOps is not terribly hard, which I think is pretty awesome. Paul, did you have any additional questions as well that you wanted to ask Garrett?
Yeah, I think, just based on the last point, it's interesting is we talk about DevOps and we're like, yeah, a lot of people using DevOps and it's great. Like, what about the teams that are really struggling to implement DevOps? Like, how do we get those people on board? And if so, how?
Wow, that's a great question. A lot of times I see folks struggling just, resource constrained. Either they don't have much of a budget, they don't have, recs to hire personnel. From my experience, I mean, again, just not to reiterate, but the whole DevOps problem is solved by, effective communication. So if you don't have a organization that is conducive to that, or you have an organization that likes to dump all responsibility onto one person, or you have folks that like to act as a bottleneck, that's going to be an impediment to a successful DevOps implementation. Also, not all organizations are going to benefit from DevOps. If you're just starting out trying to launch your product, I would spend most of your time in R&D on your product, not trying to get your DevOps environment going. So yeah, I mean, smaller shops having greater aspirations than they should for DevOps. That's a hard thing because it takes a team to really get that to work effectively. And if you're a team of one, there's not much you can do.
Yeah, it's true.
For sure, for sure. And I actually want to correct myself. It was John Allspaw that wrote that Chrome extension. So before we jump into the news segment, of course, here in a little bit, Garrett, I do have 5 more questions for you for Application Security Weekly, if you're up for it.
I'm up for it.
Nice. All right. Well, so first off, what were the specs like on your first computer?
Oh, wow. My first computer was an Apple IIc. So I'm not sure what the specs were like, but they weren't very good. It was certainly a green screen. I had to purchase the modem separately, and it was a dial-up like 9600 baud modem.
Wait, how many 5 1/4 inch floppy drives did you have on it?
It had one. It was like built into the side, and I think you had to buy an extra one if you wanted to do any kind of duplication, or archiving.
Yeah, I did. I had 2, so I was the cool kid on the block with 2 5 1/4 inch floppy drives.
Yeah, you're the guy who got all the video
copying
games
their games at Paul's place.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's awesome. So then I have to ask, what programming language did you learn first? And if you're writing any code today, what you're enjoying today?
First programming language was TI Basic, that is Texas Instruments Basic. And it was a basic programming language. Today, I'll be honest, I'm a terrible coder. One of my favorite people in the industry told me that there are 2 types of people. There are people that build and people that destroy. I'm one of the people that destroys. When I have to code, I always look to my trusty friend Python.
There you go. It's a great language. I would agree with that. But then I also have to ask if you happen to dive into this holy war or not, Vim or Emacs?
So I am a hardcore VI user. So I'm kind of, on the fray.
There you go. That's the one always that Paul, he worries about it whenever I ask somebody. Cause
I hold my breath every time. And that's in the worst possible scenarios. If someone goes, well, neither, it's nano. Just get off the show. Get off the show.
So they say, oh no, I wrote my own OS and Emacs. It's like I don't ever want to talk to you again.
Right. See, it's funny. I learned Vim. I have nothing against Emacs, and so it's always funny to hear people's staunch opinions of the matter. So the next one, though, especially that you're a Python user, this is important: spaces or tabs.
Oh God. I don't even know enough to have an opinion on this. I always use spaces because I'm lazy, but
same. Well, I use 4 spaces represented by a tab, or rather a tab as 4 spaces. That's the way I like to think of it. Some people, especially in the JavaScript community, are like 2 spaces or bust, and I'm like, yeah, I don't have the eyes for that. I wear glasses.
Right.
Paul's wearing his Gunners.
But if you're developing and you're switching back and forth between an IDE and like a console on Chrome, tabs don't work.
Yeah, right. That's the whole other problem. So good point there. The last question that I have for you is, who would you nominate, or what topic would you like to see covered on a future episode of Application Security Weekly?
Oh wow, that's a question I was not prepared for. Maybe dynamic versus static code analysis and how we're seeing those 2 evolve into this concept known as IAST, and what is this crazy RASP thing?
Man, I'd love to have that as a throwdown episode, bring a bunch of people on to talk about it. Paul, that could be an entire webinar.
That could be like that could be like where we dress up in those big sumo wrestling suits and we duke it out, right?
I'm down.
Yeah, it'd be awesome.
Totally work. That'd be great.
That'd be
RASP on awesome. Well, Garrett, thank you so much for. Oh, Paul's. Hold on.
I'm just designing outfits. I'm silly today. Sorry, Keith. Go ahead.
All right. Well, with that, thank you, Garrett, for showing up on Application Security Weekly. It was great having you. We are going to take a short break. Excuse me, if I could talk, and come back to the news.